Hi, and welcome to the Animal Welfare Junction. This is your host, Dr. G, and our music is written and produced by Mike Sullivan. Today's guest is Shelby Bobosky, the Executive Director of the Texas Humane Legislation Network. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the Junction.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, can you start by letting our audience know who you are and what brought you to where you are today?
Sure. So I'm Shelby Bobosky. I am the Executive Director of Texas Humane Legislation Network. I am an attorney by trade. I am originally from the Chicagoland area and came down to Texas in 1999 to go work at a law firm. And about 12 years into my career, I was sitting at my desk and I got this email that said there was a puppy mill raid at a location and they were looking for volunteers. Now you have to be certified, you have to have your Red Rover certification, but back then they just needed people to help. So I was so miserable as an attorney at my corporate job. And I said, wow, I want to help. I want to see this in action. So I could not believe that the puppy mill was in a tiny one-bedroom home and then a detached garage, and there were over 500 animals. This was in 2009. And when I went down there as an attorney, I just kept thinking over and over, how is this legal, right? Like how is it allowed that one woman in her late 70s could get to a point where she had 500 dogs? And so we were obviously not on the property and we are going through all these animals. And when I started to talk to some other people about it, they said, you really need to get involved with the Texas Humane Legislation Network. They are the organization that goes to the Capitol in Texas and changes laws. So I went at the time and I found some of the leadership and we talked. And soon after I joined the board, I was board president, I was the ledge chair. And then in 2019, literally 10 years later, I was offered the executive director position and I finally started getting paid for all the work we all were doing. So anyways, it was really a great ending. But in 2009, we tried to pass a law that would regulate breeders. And at the last minute, it died. And then we were able to pass it in 2011. And then come full circle in 2023, we strengthened it and revised it and updated it. So that's kind of how I got involved in animal welfare, because in my opinion, and being an attorney, you can effectuate change for thousands of animals through the passage of one law. So that's why I'm passionate about changing laws.
That's great because I'm doing the MSL program at Lewis and Clark, and one of the things that they talk about is how you can take somebody to court for animal cruelty, or you can change animal cruelty laws so that it affects more people. So both are important, but we try to. I personally I used to hate politics and the legal system and all that stuff, and I wanted to stay out of it. And then I realized that that's actually where I can be more effective, right? Is putting my knowledge of veterinary medicine and then learning more about animal laws to strengthen these laws and then make big changes.
1000%. And quite frankly, sometimes animal issues are the only thing that can bring politicians together. A perfect example is we have two congressmen. One is a Democrat, one is a Republican. And back in 2019, they came together to do a proclamation to adopt more shelter animals. I cannot tell you how opposed they are on every other issue, but there's a picture of both of them standing side by side with like 4 or 5 shelter animals. And, sometimes it truly is the only thing that might bring two people with such opposing views. As long as they're common sense animal bills, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, as long as it's common sense.
Yeah, I think that's the true bipartisan issue is
Yeah,
animal welfare, right?
right.
Like everybody can get behind that.
Yeah. And also, one party doesn't get to claim it over another, right? Because everybody cares for their animals in different levels, obviously. But, it's not like the Democrats are better or the Republicans. It truly takes everyone to come together to pass these laws.
So the main reason I invited you over was to talk about one of my favorite subjects, the infamous puppy mills. And I know that you're a big advocate of that. So what is your involvement with puppy mills?
Sure. So, back in 2009, when I was there trying to help these 500 dogs, we realized then as we pushed through this bill in Texas to regulate large scale breeders. And so many people come, like, I think the first misconception is, I don't understand why we can't outlaw puppy mills, right? Like, why can't we just ban them altogether? And the issue there is this is a business and you're shutting down a business. And in the state of Texas, I'm sure you've heard, we are all about independence and, inviting businesses into our state all the time. And so the next best thing you can do is to regulate them and try to stop the cruelty before it begins. So in 2011, we passed the Texas Dog or Cat License Breeder Act. And basically what this did is under the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, you have to get a license if you have 11 or more breeding females. And that includes a pre-inspection. And then also include, inspections after that. You pay a licensing fee every year and you get a license number. And we realized over those 10 years between 2011 and 2023 that 11 breeding females is so many, right? And it's not catching everybody. And you had large scale commercial breeders that would stay at 10, right? And so we needed to bring more people into more breeders into the program to make it successful. So it was great. In 2023, we passed a law strengthening that, bringing it from 11 breeding females down to 5 breeding females. And our state representative that was the champion is a veterinarian. His name is Representative Dr. Brad Buckley, and he is from the Waco Killeen area, more Killeen. But he really saw the need to get more people to come into the program. And honestly, there are several responsible owners that like being, there are several responsible breeders that like being licensed. Why? Well, they like to charge more money, but they actually talk about how it keeps them honest and it keeps them aware of all the different regulations that they truly have to follow. I'm not saying the Texas Dog or Cat License Breeder Act is like, gold standard up there, really strict, but we needed a baseline to hold certain irresponsible breeders accountable. So we see that it's working quite well. Yeah.
I think that's important because to me, there's not a lot of difference between a lot of puppy mills and like hoarders, right? The only difference is that hoarders are not generating a profit, which is why breeders get away with it. I've worked with animal neglect and cruelty cases where we
Yes.
walk in and we see these animals that are overcrowded, that there's poor sanitation, that there's no good socialization,
Yeah.
and these people, the animals are taken away and the people are given fines, they're giving, different things by law, but yet some breeders are doing exactly the same thing
Mhm.
and they're allowed to do it because it's like minimal standard of care that is
Yeah.
being afforded, right? Like they have a roof over their head and they're being given food, so then they're allowed to get away with these practices.
Yeah. We've really seen excitement about these changes coming from within. And this is really interesting because when we passed the law back in 2011, obviously we had some individuals in these breeder chat rooms, right? And they're like, good riddance, Texas, I'm gone. I want to go to a state that doesn't regulate me. Great. See you
Get
later.
out.
And then in 2023, we really saw a change. Like, well, it's a good time for me to get out of the industry. Or, yeah, I'm going to sell half of them and just focus on these. And I'm going to start like these other side businesses and projects. So, like, our whole thing at THLN is trying to look at a problem from a 40,000-foot view and see how can we make things better for certain aspects of animal welfare. And for our point of view, we really need to stop the puppy mill pipeline that is coming into Texas. But before we did that, we needed to update and enhance and strengthen the licensed breeder law. Because, we really believe that if you want a Labradoodle Snoodle or whatever kind of mixed breed that's out there, go to your local shelter. I'm telling you, 27% of purebreds and these specialty dogs are found in shelters, right? But if you don't want to do that, go to your local breed club. And so we really wanted to fix the Texas law first before we tackled the next huge problem, which is puppies and pet stores, which is going to be our main focus in 2025. And speaking of that, I'll tell you, I currently have at my house a half pug, half beagle, a puggle. And this puggle came from Dallas Animal Services. And someone paid a lot of money for this dog. It's probably about a year old. Unbelievable, you know? So we're just always telling people, please, why are you purchasing a $4,000 puppy from a pet store when you can go 2 to 3 miles and find the love of your life at a shelter?
And I think part of it is that consumers have this misconception that if they go to a breeder, then the animal is not going to have behavioral problems. It's not going to be abused because, clearly every animal in a shelter has previous abuse history, even if it's like a 4-month-old puppy or 4-week-old puppy.
Right.
But they think that they're going to be healthy, that they're going to be, especially from pet stores. Oh, well, it's AKC registered. So clearly it comes from a great lineage. And they don't understand that they don't really know the background of that dog any more than they would know the background of a shelter dog, right?
Mhm. Yes. We just, perfect example. I am in Dallas, and Plano is a suburb about 20 miles north of us. A couple weeks ago, they got in a puppy from a pet store. The woman paid on her credit card $6,000. She brought the dog in because it had Giardia. And she was like, I'm done. I don't want to get, I don't know if she didn't understand what Giardia is, but she didn't want it affecting her family. She was so put out by everything. Just dropped the dog off at the shelter. Unbelievable, right? So at the end of the day, you're exactly right. It's all about education. One of the reasons I'm so excited to be here, and again, I thank you so much for the invite, is on September 21st, it is the National Puppy Mill Awareness Day. So again, just putting it out there into the universe that, do you all know where these puppies are coming from? 90% of the puppies in pet stores are coming from puppy mills. Just something as simple as that, just getting that out to the public is truly so important. I'll say this too, being from Dallas, a couple weeks ago, we just had an article that was put out there about how Dallas Animal Services is overflowing with wonderful adoptable dogs, but there's just too many. And the tagline in the article was, Dallas citizens, please stop buying puppies at pet stores. So we really need to support our local shelters. And again, you could get a puggle, you could get any kind of breed that you want because they're there. They're at these shelters.
Many animal advocates and people who just love dogs are very against the euthanasia of animals at shelters, right? And all of this no kill and everything else. But I don't think that consumers really understand how these practices of buying dogs are actually what's causing these shelters and rescues to be oversaturated with animals and end up euthanizing perfectly healthy animals just because there's no room for them all.
Right. You bring up such a good point. And from a policy standpoint, this is where elected officials understand this. So follow me here. Why is Texas shipping in thousands of puppies? I'm not kidding, monthly, right? From these various puppy mill states in the Midwest. Why are we shipping them in? And yet we are killing ourselves rescuing and saving thousands of dogs here, and we're shipping them to this up north. It makes zero sense, and these pet stores that sell the puppies, they are not held to the same standards as our own shelters, right? Our shelter animals, they should be vaccinated. They are checked on, but yet puppy stores are selling sick puppies, and there's absolutely no ramifications for it. Especially in Texas, we do not have a puppy lemon law. And so what does that mean? A lot of stores now, it's unbelievable what they have in their disclaimers. And it basically says, I can disclaim my breach of warranty from you. And what that means is I can sell you a sick puppy and there's nothing you can do about it as long as you sign here. And a lot of people don't understand that when they buy these puppies. They think, wait a minute, I'm paying $7,000. Now you've sold me a puppy and the puppy is sick or the puppy has a congenital disease, correct? But wait, now I've given my rights away just by signing the contract. And yes, it's true. So, there's so many aspects about these puppies being sold in these pet stores. And our job is really coming up on September 21st is to really inform our consumers all about it. But from a policy standpoint, again, why are we shipping in thousands of puppies, but yet we're killing ourselves to get all these other dogs to different parts and shipping out thousands of healthy animals that would be euthanized due to space?
And I would think that if the laws in Texas have improved so that you are more strict with your breeders, that would mean that you would want to have stronger consumer protection laws. So you're allowing animals that are coming from other places that do not have these strict requirements to just come in, right? It's just bypassing the things that you are doing to protect your citizens.
Absolutely. But it's really interesting. And here in speaking with some of our elected officials, which is what my job is, what I hear from them is, well, hold on a minute, Shelby. If this business is so bad and they keep selling sick puppies, the marketplace is going to take care of it and they'll go out of business because everyone will know. But what I have to explain to them is the following, something called a NDA. So what is a non-disclosure agreement? So let's say I purchase a sick puppy and, they decide to pay some of the vet bills and maybe give me $4,000 to settle my claim. They require me to sign a non-disclosure agreement. That means I can't talk about my sick puppy. You would not believe the amount of people that we found just in Texas alone that have signed these NDAs and say, I'd love to talk to you, but I can't. So it's really hiding and masking the problem. And that is why they are allowed to continue to sell those puppies. So you're exactly right. When you look at this from policy standpoints, well, wouldn't the business just kind of solve itself? Shouldn't we give that kind of protection? And we really need to, because some of the horror stories, I'm sure, as you can imagine, are pretty outlandish, and we're allowing it because we don't have that puppy lemon law. So in 2025, our goal is to stop the sale of puppies in pet stores unless they are humanely sourced. And it's going to be very difficult because Texas is a freedom state, and legislative sessions are very, very difficult. 3 out of 4 bills fail in Texas every session. So we've got our work cut out for us.
But yeah, I mean, it's about protecting the animals. It's about protecting the consumers. And another thing that people don't think about when purchasing these animals at like $8,000, $10,000, all that stuff is the predatory lending issues, right? Because
Yes.
they are selling these animals for a ton of money and
Yeah.
then giving them credit and then charging them ridiculous percentages, right?
Yeah. You nailed it. Can you believe there is something called pet leasing in Texas? So what that means is I'm actually leasing the dog I thought I was buying. And if you stop the payments in 2 instances, a family and a woman told us that they were threatening to repo the dog. Where are you gonna bring the dog? The dog's now too, right? The dog isn't a piece of furniture. It is a living sentient being that you're now going to take from this person because they were paying up to 200% interest. None of that is explained. A puppy's in your lap, you've fallen in love. A lot of these are impulse purchases, right? So of course you sign on the dotted line, but you have no idea the amount of interest and how predatory these truly are. Excellent point. Yeah.
Yeah, I have spoken to several people who have had issues with dogs purchased at pet stores. And the one thing that is a common theme is that they'll tell me that the person at the store selling them the animal is telling them stories. No, it's not from a puppy mill. Oh no, it's healthy. Oh, this is what we do. This is whatever. and they tell them all sorts of stuff. So then when they get the contract, they just sign. And the
Yeah,
contract says that this is what matters, not whatever the person that talked to you told you.
exactly.
So, it's like they'll tell you whatever you want to hear so that you can purchase this animal. As a veterinarian, I've had animals come in that the person, the purchaser says, "Oh, it doesn't need any more vaccines. They told me it doesn't need anything else ever." No, no, no. It needs a lot of stuff still. Oh, but I asked and they told me no. No, they're going to tell you whatever you want to hear just to get that animal out the door and get that money from you.
That is such a really excellent point. I've never thought about it that way. They're going to tell you lies upon lies upon lies in getting you to purchase that dog. But then the document you sign cancels out everything they've told you. I've really never thought of it that way before, and that's great. Well, I will tell you that we have been working on some undercover footage, and you couldn't be more spot on. Oh, our breeder only does 3 litters a year. And they're like, oh, what's your breeder's name? And sometimes they don't tell you, but when they do, and then you go and look that breeder up, 3 litters a year. Because the USDA says that this breeder has 475 dogs on his property. I mean, it's just, but again, the internet is catching up with them to a certain extent and everybody's getting better. But, some of our national partners like HSUS and some of these others, they have done a phenomenal job, really documenting what happens in these puppy mills, and they're horrific. But what I'm curious to hear from your standpoint, based on your expertise, is the way that these puppies are transported down, because I think that, sidebar to the congenital defects, and we can talk about that in a minute, but the Giardia and all these different epizootic diseases, right? So what they do is they put dogs from different litters at very young ages in these white transport vans, and they come down and deliver them to the pet stores. And so from your standpoint, it's kind of like an epizootic nightmare waiting to happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're putting animals, as you mentioned, that have no good immune system. Normally we tell people, hey, keep your puppy away from other animals until it's fully vaccinated. And
Yeah.
we're taking these puppies that are not properly vaccinated because a lot of these breeders are given vaccines themselves, and
Mhm.
the puppies are in such a stress situation that they're not really developing good immunity. So then you're taking this puppy that I picked up here in Ohio, and then I'm driving a little further and I'm picking this puppy in Iowa, and I'm driving further, stopping at Missouri, going all the way to wherever they're going to go. And we are getting all of this combination of things. But then we're also transmitting all of these diseases. I
Yeah.
actually, since you mentioned the HSUS, several years ago, I worked with them because they purchased a puppy undercover. They purchased a puppy, a doodle, that the question that the person asked, the person purchasing the puppy was pregnant and said, I want to make sure that this puppy doesn't have Campylobacter because of my health. And they
Mhm.
said there's less than a 0.1% chance, I think is the statistic that the person said, less than a 0.1% chance that this puppy has Campylobacter. They purchased the puppy and they brought him directly to me, no stops, straight to me to examine this puppy. I examined this puppy. Guess what it had? Campylobacter. Campylobacter so resistant that it took 6 months to clear it. Um,
Oh my God.
somebody that I know ended up adopting the puppy, and somebody that took care of the hygiene. I know that the puppy was getting treated properly, and it still took 6 months to get this puppy cleared. So we're talking about the health of the dog, the health of the puppy, which we
Mhm.
care as animal advocates, but then
Mhm.
also the health of this pregnant individual that was just given an animal that can
Right.
send her to the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some really interesting stories out there that wherein a person was doing undercover work in the pet stores, and they had to actually cut their undercover work short because they got Campylobacter. I mean, it's just, but even on top of the epizootic diseases, we know now why these dogs are sick. It's not rocket science. They're all put together and they come into this environment. But not only that, the congenital defects. So, one of the reasons that we really feel so strongly and so passionate about this law is there was a French bulldog named Sir Harold. And unfortunately, he passed, but he was purchased at a Dallas pet store that no longer exists. And he had so many congenital diseases. Within 3 days, he had a curved spine. He was blind in one eye, but yet the veterinarian told the rescue that took him, he's got to be euthanized, and whoever is breeding this dog needs to stop immediately because the two parents should never be bred together, right? And so it's the congenital defects as well. And I'll tell you, we got a call from a Houston area consumer. She bought a boxer, and within 2 months of buying the boxer, it was clear that the boxer had a congenital defect in one eye that was going to mean that the dog was going to be blind within 2 years. So again, nobody is checking and nobody cares because it's, again, the definition of puppy mill is profit over the welfare of the animals. And that is why we say, go to responsible breeders. What is a responsible breeder? Where you can meet the parents. You can see where the dog's being born. There's not more than a certain amount of litters per year. These are all green flags. None of those can ever be met at a pet store.
Yeah, and another thing that consumers don't realize is that the pet stores are making so much money out of these dogs, right? Because they're not paying thousands of dollars for the puppies that they're selling for thousands of dollars. They're paying
Right.
next to nothing for these puppies and
Right.
then doing these ridiculous markups. So people are paying so much money to sometimes even so much money that then they don't have enough money to take care of any medical issues, even as
Yeah.
simple as vaccinations.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, they're getting these dogs and they're sick. They have problems, whether it be congenital problems or diseases, transmissible diseases. Then the
Right.
people have no money to take care of it and no recourse.
And no money to hire an attorney, right? I When I was a younger attorney back in the day, I would volunteer for Dallas Volunteer Attorney Program. So one night a week, you would go up there and just listen to common issues. And because I was an animal lover back then, they would give me the calls from the puppies and pet stores that were sick or had died. And, that's when I realized how good they were getting at making sure that there were so many disclaimers in the paperwork that they would never, the lawsuits would really amount to nothing. And just 2 weeks ago, somebody called our hotline and said that they had spent $18,000 for 8 months on vet bills because they fell in love with the puppy, and they wanted to save the puppy's life. 18,000. The pet store never called them back. They just brought a lawsuit in small claims court, and the pet store hired a really expensive law firm. Come on, make this guy right again. Just pay him his vet bills. But yet they're fighting it and paying a lawyer instead. That's what I have such a problem with.
Yeah, it's a problem that they start, it's a problem that they
Yes.
cause.
Yeah,
And then most people don't even want anything additional. They just want to be made whole again.
right, right.
Right?
Or how about not lied to?
Mhm. Yeah,
Anyways, it's
no,
very
absolutely.
frustrating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And some of the contracts that I have looked at, I saw a contract recently that said that it would cover congenital diseases, but only within the first year. Well,
Mhm.
a lot of congenital diseases do not show up until
That's right.
past the first year,
That's
right?
right.
So if you have a
Yeah,
dog with like a liver shunt, it may not show symptoms of that liver shunt after a year.
yeah,
A lot of the congenital orthopedic problems,
right.
that's what, they don't show up until later on. So it's kind of like they're molding their contracts to make it sound like they're giving you something, but realistically they're taking things away. I have seen recent contracts that say that they will not cover problems secondary to hypoglycemia in puppies. Well, because they know that every tiny little 2 pound pocket animal that they sell is going to
Mhm.
have hypoglycemia and is going to end up at the vet. So they're
Yeah,
like, yeah, we don't cover hypoglycemia. They won't cover kennel cough. They won't cover things that are normally seen from
right.
these dogs from high situations.
What's really interesting about that too is they also make you, like when you purchase something, oh, do you want a warranty? Do you want it's going to be, $25 more, but it will protect you? So they would make them pay like this alleged pet insurance or whatever the case is, or we're going to give you a 2-year warranty, but then everything's disclaimed in it, right? But now why did I pay for that in the first place? And it's interesting as we talk about obviously epizootic diseases, which are more temporary, and then the congenital issues. But one of the things that people don't understand is those dogs that don't get sold right away, right? They sit there in a glass box under fluorescent light. They've been removed from their moms way too early, and their feet are on wire crates. And what we just saw with our undercover video it just looks bad. You look at that, and the dog is it's about 4 months old, just pacing, coughing, coughing, pacing. Who would purchase that dog? So what happens then when they don't sell those dogs? Or let's say someone brings a dog back and says, I don't want that dog. They're clearly euthanized. Where are they going? I mean, maybe they're selling them to secondhand someone's, but it's just the whole situation. When we have wonderful, purebred, young, adoptable animals at rescues and shelters throughout Texas, it makes no sense.
Yeah, people are under the false idea that every dog in a shelter is a pit bull, right? Like you can't go
Yes.
to a shelter and come out without anything but a pit bull. But a
Yeah.
lot of the rescue groups that I work with, they're seeing a huge influx of doodles. And this is because there's so many backyard breeders that are just breeding these dogs over and over and over, and the market is not there. Like people are finally kind of getting tired of doodles, and they're ending at the shelters.
That's
So
right.
realistically, you can get pretty much any animal from a shelter or rescue organization.
Yeah. You know, uh, Gosh, you nailed it, especially in Texas. My favorite part is, so I have a shelter dog from Dallas Animal Services, and then I have a former dog fighting dog from Houston. She's lovely. They're both great dogs, but they don't do well when dogs approach them. I promise you, in my neighborhood, it is filled with doodles and younger people that do not leash their doodles. So you'll have this doodle that's like, duh, 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 full speed at us. And then, the 24-year-old's like, oh, don't worry, she's friendly. And I've got my dogs double leashed. And I'm like, mine aren't. There isn't a leash law. Like, what are you doing? So believe me, I know full well about the doodle takeover, at least of my neighborhood. But you bring up such a good point in that dogs that trend is the most frustrating thing, I think, for animal advocates and animal welfare folks throughout the United States, because the dogs that trend are not good for families. The doodles have such high energy, right? And these families that get them have no idea how much energy they have. Or remember when 101 Dalmatians came out, right? Dalmatians, in my opinion, do not make good family pets. And then so we see that influx in the shelters. When Paris Hilton and all those Beverly Hills Chihuahua, they were bringing around the pocket pets. Then our shelters are full with them. So it's so frustrating, but you are 100% doodles right now are everywhere in every rescue, and in shelters. It's really actually unbelievable. And I will never forget when I saw recently a picture of a doodle that was found 3 neighborhoods from here, matted, looked terrible. And I'm like, that's a doodle. So now even people that are spending thousands of dollars on these dogs are just dropping them off at shelters, probably because they did not do their research, right? Very
Yeah.
frustrating.
No, yeah, they a lot of them are like you said, they're really high activity. Like you need to take them for walks and you need to take them to
Mhm.
the park and all that stuff. They also tend to have a lot of problems, like skin problems, because they have inherited a lot of the issues from the
Mhm.
non-poodle side of the family, plus the
Right.
poodle side of the family. So we
Right.
see a lot of doodles that have chronic allergy problems, chronic ear infections. The other thing that I have noticed is that there's a lot of scams because doodle puppies look like doodle puppies. So
Yeah.
I see what I would consider an Australian Shepherd Poodle mix, what people
Mhm.
would call an Aussie Doodle, but then
Mhm.
it comes in as something else, like a cockapoo. And it's like they're just
Yes,
telling you whatever they want to tell you
that's right.
because they all look the same. And then
That's
once
right.
the dog grows up and is an adult, Yeah, I mean, you already like the dog. You're in love with the
Right.
dog and you don't want to get rid of it because of what it
Right.
looks like, but you've been completely scammed because, unfortunately some people have been gullible and just taken over.
You nailed it. And from my standpoint, okay, we've had 3 or 4 calls into our hotline saying that they purchased a puppy at the store. And let's say it was supposed to be a Bernedoodle. It was not either of those breeds because they went and did a DNA test. And of course, they love the animals, but that just goes to show again, they don't care about the welfare of the animal. Like, a breeder that belongs to a local breed club that takes it seriously. And in addition to that, to talk about local breeders, a lot of them sign ethics pledges that say, I would never sell to a pet store, which is why it's so confusing and conflicting that the American Kennel Club comes to Texas and fights our bills. It is so frustrating because when you go to the American Kennel Club website and they say, oh, signs for a responsible breeder, meet the parents. Well, right, you can't do that at a pet store, but yet they come and they brag when they kill our bills. It's very, very frustrating. But you definitely hit it with the doodles and the issues. If you can help me answer this, I've heard a lot of different answers. So many people say, oh, well, the doodles are hypoallergenic. Is that true?
It is absolutely 100% not true. And I would say, so it depends on the genes that they inherit, right? Because they are a mix of two separate dogs. So if they, for whatever reason, are 100% poodle as far as their hair coat, then yeah, they're not going to shed and they're potentially hypoallergenic. But not every doodle is hypoallergenic. And I think that that's how a lot of these dogs are entering the shelters because individuals who truly are allergic or that they
Right,
have a child with allergies, the puppies are not going to cause allergies until they start developing that adult coat. So you have that dog for 6 to 8 months. Then now all of a sudden it's a problem. So
yep,
now all of a sudden you have to get rid of your dog or your kid, right? And even though a lot of animal advocates says get rid of the kid, that's not feasible. They're not going to get rid of their kid. And somebody, if they have real serious health concerns, I can understand. Like if the child has asthma or the person has asthma and they physically cannot have that dog, they need to find somewhere for it to go. So
right,
that is one of their best selling arguments that
yeah,
is just unfortunately not true.
yeah. Well, it's such a good point. And then also my favorite is when when I'm like just talking to people like, on Facebook, friends, family members, right? And I say, okay, why do you want to burn a doodle or what, kind of these designer breeds? And they're like, well, I just don't want a mutt. And I say, that is a mutt. You want to, well, no, it's not. No, actually it is. It is not a purebred dog. My American Staffordshire Terrier is more purebred than your Berner Schnitzel Doodle or whatever they're called, right? And they kind of think about it, and I'm like, yeah, you just paid $7,000 for a mutt. So, again, just kind of getting the awareness out there is just so important. And
Yeah.
we do the best we can, but you just would not believe the people that are buying puppies at pet store because we're seeing it. We're seeing it come through.
Yeah, and at the beginning, they were at least trying to come up with names that did not sound like mutts, right? Because way back when,
Yeah.
the first designer breed was the Oripe, which was a Pug Shar mix.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so they were taking these dogs, and the majority of them, the litters, would look a certain way. So they could potentially say that it's a breed because the majority of them you would see them, and people heard Oripe and they thought this is a new breed. It's an actual breed. No, it's a mutt. And over time, with the designer, we're not even trying, right? Instead of making up these, fancy names, we're
Yeah.
just telling you what the mix is.
Right.
It's a shepherd doodle. It's a
Yes.
cockapoo.
Right.
Like they're admitting Bernedoodle. They're admitting that these are mixes of something and a poodle, and
Yeah.
people are failing to recognize that they are mutts. They are buying a mutt, and
Right.
they're overpaying for a mutt. Because the other thing that I find kind of somewhat ridiculous is that purebreds are actually going out of style, and you can buy a purebred for less than you can buy a doodle. So you can go to a pet store and spend 1,500 on a purebred Doberman Pinscher, but
Yeah.
then you pay $6,000 to buy a crossbreed with a poodle.
Such such a good point. It really, and it just goes back to why if you really want that dog, go to a local breeder, meet the parents. It's going to be a lot cheaper for you anyways. And a lot of those breeders want the dog back. You know, I mean, I'm just curious as to what you think. If I return my 10-week-old puppy because now I find out it has a congenital defect and I can't pay for it. I don't want to deal with it. What's going to happen to that puppy? Oh, well, they say, oh, we just return it to the breeder. Really? Does it make it to the breeder? I mean, it's just, again, let's go back to people that actually care about the history of the breed and the lineage and all of those things that are important to those breeders because they are not selling to pet stores, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I always tell people say, "Well, you're pro breeder." I'm not pro breeder. I am pro shelter all the way. Like I would like every animal to be from adoptive homes, but I understand that there are people that want to purchase a particular animal.
Mhm.
Okay, fine. If that's what you're going to do, get educated. Figure out where you're getting these animals from. Like you said, meet the parents. Responsible breeders are going to do tests under animals to make sure that they have no eye problems, no joint problems, no congenital issues. If they find an animal that has a congenital issue, they sterilize it, they take it out of the breeding line, and they either keep it as a pet or they rehome it somewhere. They're
Mhm.
not just going to like euthanize it or put it up for auction like
Yeah.
puppy mills do,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, they interview the people buying the dogs because they want to make sure that these puppies are going to a good place. And if something
Mhm.
happens, they want those puppies back because their real intention is to promote the breed standards as they should be, and then make sure that these dogs are going to be well cared for.
Right. Well, I just love getting, your feedback and understanding on this issue because I think sometimes people feel like veterinarians are okay with puppy mill puppies. And I know so many that, are not because they see the results of truly terrible breeding and putting profit, over the welfare of the animal. So I love your voice in this realm. So thank
Thank you.
you.
No, thank you. And yeah, like as veterinarians, we need to be better advocates because like speaking of animals that are in like hot right now is all of these brachycephalics. So the Frenchies. Everybody wants to go and get a Frenchie. And as a veterinarian, a Frenchie is just like a disaster case of a patient, right? And I think that they're cute. I can appreciate why people like them, especially when they're puppies, but they're not bred for existence. I mean, they
Mhm.
have to be born by C-sections because their moms can't even have them naturally most of the time, but they have so many problems. They have so many breathing problems and some
Mhm.
can be surgically corrected and some
Mhm.
cannot, but yet we're telling everybody, "Hey, this is the breed to get. Go out and get a Frenchie."
Right.
And what are we doing?
Yeah.
It's just horrible.
I don't think when you want to buy a Frenchie and you go to a pet store and you go in and pay 9,000, some of the brindle and the different coloring now through the national pet stores selling puppies. Well, there's only really one in the top 25% of the retail train. But they have no idea that that dog was born via C-section. I didn't know that until a couple months ago. I could not believe it. But it goes back to Sir Harold. He was a Frenchie. And I mean, the congenital defects alone, it's almost cruel, to breed them because of all those issues. Anyways,
Yeah, and
yeah.
people think that AKC paper, and not all of them have AKC registrations, but people
Mhm.
don't know the difference. So they'll say like, "Oh, is this puppy registered?" Yeah, it's CKC, and people hear KC and they think, "Oh yeah, it's legit." And some of these registrations, like I could even just submit a registration with no dog, and they'll send me paperwork, right?
Yeah,
But as that, you would think that the AKC would have a stronger voice against animals that are not good representatives of the breed. But
right.
yet, having all of I mean, it's bringing the money somehow to allow for all of these poorly bred animals to be out there in the market.
It's as simple as this. To me, in my opinion, it's like a book of the month club. Nobody from the AKC is putting their hands on these dogs. They are not going and inspecting any of these places. It is just every time a puppy is born and registered, it makes them money. It's as simple as that. But you know, possibly back in the day when you had a dog that was AKC certified, it meant something. It means nothing today. Because if it did, then it's the biggest sham in the world because Harold was AKC. Oh, we've got his papers. Okay, so he had 7 congenital defects and you guys registered him and you approved him, put your seal on it. It's a book of the month club. It is not taken seriously. And that is why they fight against these laws to limit it because it means, in my opinion, less money in their pockets. Again, let's go back to this. On their own website, they talk about what it means to be a responsible breeder. But then they fight a law that says you shouldn't sell a puppy in a pet store. It just makes no sense. So I think it's important also, again, that that educational awareness gets out there because I think it's that, oh, AKC gold standard. Nobody from the AKC has gone to that puppy mill and inspected that dog. And people don't know that.
Yeah, I was researching a puppy mill for one of the cases that I was looking into. And several years ago, this particular breeder was fined because they had multiple males and females in enclosures,
Mm.
right? So these animals are AKC registered, they're licensed
Yeah.
individually, but how do you know what male bred with that female? Like you know which female gave birth to the puppies. So okay, you
Right.
know who the dam is,
Sure.
but how do you know who the sire is?
Yeah.
You're just picking up which dog you want to be the dad and then
Mhm.
sending in the registration. And
Yeah.
they
Good
were
point.
yeah, and then the I don't remember if it was the USDA or if it was the local Department of Agriculture or whoever it was, like gave them a fine and told them you have to stop doing this. Well, are they stopping? Are they stopping that day? Are they continuing to do it? And then when they know that they're coming in to get checked out, they separate them out. Like
That's
there's a
right.
lot of different things that can happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, the papers, AKC registration in this kind of situations are somewhat meaningless.
They really are. They're not seeing these animals. So at least the animals that I know that have congenital defects that are being sold at puppy stores. And I mean, like visual too. You're exactly right, being the expert. A lot of these defects pop up at later times. But one of the pictures we saw, I mean, the hip dysplasia at such a young age, you knew something was wrong. Oh, no, no, no. They told the pet store representative, told the purchaser, guess what? He's going to grow into those hips. What? Come on. So, I would end on this. Laws are so important for animal welfare. And I know it's not sexy. I know politics, like you said in the beginning, can be very difficult. Trust me, I had a state senator that I had nothing in common with except for animals. He had 2 rescue dogs, and that was about it. We could talk about it, but he had a great animal scorecard. And so, when we change the laws, we can effectuate change for thousands of animals at a time. That beginning story that I told you about the puppy mill 20 miles from my house, where there were 500 dogs. So in 2009, we didn't pass the law. This particular owner had over 500 dogs because we weren't even counting the pregnant females that gave birth within the time of the raid. 2 years later, because there was no law against it, that same breeder, who, by the way, went into court trying to get her dogs back, and she had a cane and a wig, right? Within 2 years, she had amassed over 70 dogs. So if you don't fix your laws, then you are just going to continue to run into the same problem. And that's not fair that humane societies and these poor rural sheriffs that already have a slew of other problems, now they've got to find homes for those 70 dogs. So, again, really, if you can, check out thln.org if you live in Texas. And we have some great resources. And we need your voice during the 2025 legislative session. I like to say calling your elected officials is easier than ordering pizza. It's a 2 to 3 minute call. Don't sign a petition. Don't send an email. Call up and talk to someone in the office. Tell them you support this bill, and help us pass it because it's going to be a fight.
Sounds amazing. And I wish you all the luck and, and all the success just because it is so important. And we have to do something. Again, we keep complaining about animals dying in shelters and shelters not taking animals in, but we have to do something to stop these animals from being
And we are going to stop the puppy mill pipeline to Texas with this bill. So that's why we're excited. Thank you so much.
fantastic. Thank you so much for being here and thank you for everything that you're doing. And hopefully we'll have you again in the future to give us an update on how this all turns out.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you to all our listeners and thank you for caring.